Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third panel this afternoon. I'm glad to see all my panelists with me now, almost all. We're still missing Florence. I hope she will come in a minute. In the meantime, I will give a little introduction to the session, so you can still try to switch your camera on then. I'm very happy to have you here today to moderate this panel dedicated to the future of transnational university collaboration in Europe and fostering transnational collaboration between universities through the EU programs is really what is also a key element of the EU added value for the university sector. And as we've heard at the very beginning of the event already by Pauline Rouge, it's also very much at the heart of the new European strategy for universities from the Commission. We know, of course, it's not a new topic. Universities have collaborated in Europe for a very long time in many very different ways. But despite 2 decades of reforms in the Bologna process, mainly, so beyond the EU, larger than that, we still have some barriers and challenges that we face with that. And the European Universities Initiative and the alliances that have been developed over the last few years have brought these challenges very much again to the surface. Of course, they have existed before. They also exist in other sort of collaboration formats for universities. But the initiative is very much, again, drawn the attention to this. And in the next sort of 40 minutes, we would like to discuss some of those barriers, also see what could be possible solutions to overcome those, and maybe also look a little bit on what actually the overall goal of all these efforts should be. So we have a bit of a focus on the EU today because it's linked to the new European strategy, but as we already witnessed today, collaboration is much, much larger between universities, going really beyond political borders, taking place at many different scales, in smaller projects, small staff and student exchange programs, bottom-up research collaboration, and all kinds of strategic alliances, of which the alliances under the Universities Initiative are one of the prominent examples. And we have here with us today speakers from the very different levels. So we would really like to facilitate the debate between the different levels, the university level, the European Commission, and the national level. And I welcome now my 4 panelists. First of all, Peter Lievens, Vice-Rector for International Policy from KU Leuven in Belgium, and also member of the Board of Directors of the Europa European University Alliance, one of the first 17 that started a couple of years ago. Peter is professor in experimental physics at KU Leuven, has been dean for many years, and since 2017 is vice-rector for international policy, alumni policy, and also recently added to his portfolio the topic of interculturality, which of course in this context is also very important. And then we have hopefully soon with us again, Florence Balthasar, if the camera hopefully works in a few seconds again. She's head of international affairs of the Zürich University of Arts in Switzerland. So we also have a university from outside the EU with us today. Florence has been in this role since January 2019. And she's contributing to the development of the international strategy of the university and is also helping to implement it, of course, very much. And before, she has worked for 7 years at the Swiss co-office in Brussels, so she also knows the policy side of all of these things and can connect policy with practice. And then we have Vanessa Debiais-Sainton, head of unit higher education in the Directorate General for Education and Culture of the Commission. She's leading the unit that is very much at the root of the new strategy of the Commission and also the proposal for the Council recommendation. So we are very interested in hearing some more details about that today. And last but not least, I welcome Florian Pichl, who very kindly stepped in last minute to replace Elmar Pichl, Director General for Universities at the Austrian Ministry, who was called in by his minister in a last minute, very important meeting. So Florian, You're the head of unit for higher education and research at the Austrian Permanent Representation here in Brussels. Many thanks for stepping in last minute and representing sort of a view from the national level, from the EU member states. Before we start with your different contributions, we have also prepared a little poll, which we can open now. And we wanted to engage the audience a little bit and ask what, from your perspective, sort of how well does transnational university cooperation in Europe actually work? And you can answer that now. I know it's not a straightforward answer, usually, of course, that's why we're discussing this very much here. Yeah, well, I think most people indeed really lie in the middle and would say there are still some challenges to be solved. Indeed, that's a very good introduction for the contributions now. So we can close the poll, Valerie, I think, and would go to the first round of contributions. And I would like to start with you, Peter, for the opening statement. Could you share with us, from your perspective from KU Leuven, but also your involvement in the Europa Alliance, what do you see still as practical challenges and barriers to transnational collaboration?
Thank you very much, Anna-Lena. I hope you can understand me well. Technical problems are solved, it seems, so let's touch wood. Yeah, first of all, let me thank you for being here and to be able to voice some opinions on this particular issue on behalf of Europa, but also on behalf of KU Leuven. And I think we align quite often on these point of views with many of the universities involved in the European alliances. No need to say, and you mentioned this already in the introduction, that universities have a very, very long, even centuries-long tradition of international cooperation, which currently are even more crucial to realize all the goals that we have, which is to offer education, to conduct research and to serve society, and that then with the ambition to do this with a quality as high as possible. This is also the reason why universities like KU Leuven have strongly relied on partnerships, collaborative networks, and strategic alliances already for quite some time. But since a couple of years, there has been a game change around in Europe, and that is the initiative of establishing these European University Alliances, where in the context of which we have found with the partners of Europa, institutions sharing the same values, but also the same ambitions. So we have come together to harness complementary strengths and to work on ambitious and really innovative educational research formats. And that then again with the ambition to enhance the quality of what we are offering together. We have had many people, academics, professional staff, students also working hard on the development of some joint courses, joint programs, with many innovative aspects included, also multilingual by nature and interdisciplinary, because that is where adding each other's expertise really can make a difference. But we have also encountered boundaries. We have tried to push some of these boundaries that you have had transnational collaboration. One of the examples that we with Europa have been working on intensively is a joint bachelor degree in European studies, where our experts really have been facing quite challenging circumstances. Some solutions came up quite creatively sometimes, and now I can gladly say that we are ready now to gear up recruiting students for a first cohort that will start in September of next academic year. We already have obtained accreditation by the accreditation organization of the Netherlands and Flanders, and other programs, other universities are now working to use the European approach for quality assurance of joint programs to also be able to accredit the program there. But this has not been possible for all partner institutions, and this is why we at this moment are not able to award a degree simultaneously with all the partner institutions, universities of the Una Europa Alliance. So what we are pleading for is that this European approach and its full implementation in all member states without further national requirements is really crucial, and that it will become possible to have an accreditation through a single agency registered in the European Quality Assurance Register for higher education, which of course implies some trust in the system by all the member states. There are also other boundaries which sometimes in countries prevent at the bachelor level to create interdisciplinary programs because of quite strict regulations. And we also would very much like to have more flexibility in embedding innovative forms of mobility, which would allow the use of all the possibilities we have in European universities, with all the universities involved, to really realize this European-wide campus. And in that sense, we are really very pleased with the fact that the European Commission came up with this proposal for a Council recommendation on building bridges for effective European higher education cooperation. And the publication last week and as far as we learned this afternoon, also quite positive reception of this recommendation by the member states is really a major step forward. But what we really are calling for is full implementation of the European approach at one place, but also all member states to allow higher education institutions to put in place suitable approaches when they have joint efforts on joint degrees for admissions, for enrollment, and also for credit allocation and many other issues that sometimes are hampering swift cooperation. So really engaging in innovative joint transnational education activities is what we want. So a call is also on the member states to step up, not only to adopt the European Commission's proposal for this Council recommendation, but also to provide a implementation plan at national level that will work and that will be realized in a time as short as possible. This is where some and maybe even most of the bottlenecks lie at this moment. Solutions are around. We can help working together with member states, but also with the European Commission to provide possibilities for solutions. But removing these obstacles really would allow us to enhance transnational collaboration in the way we want, and that way enhance quality of what we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. You made already a very comprehensive overview in a way, and also presented already some of the solutions referring to what we probably hear in a bit as well from Vanessa with regard to the Commission's proposal. Before we do that, I would like to bring in Florence with another institutional perspective from Switzerland and from an institution that is a little bit more specialized, so the University of Arts, to also show the diversity of not only institutions, but also ways of collaboration and what could be done in terms of overcoming challenges there. Florence, the floor is yours.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Annalena. Thank you, EUA, for inviting me. And hello, Peter, Florian, and Vanessa. I mean, I know some of you well. It's nice to see you online. I think that the reality of Zürich University of the Arts is a bit different from the one of KU Leuven, but actually some challenges or obstacles we face are the same. And why is our reality different? We're not a comprehensive research intensive universities. We are a university of applied sciences and the arts. That's our status by Swiss law. And we are focused on arts and design disciplines only. Yet we're one of the largest in Europe, and one that gather all artistic disciplines under one roof: fine arts, design, performing arts and film, music, and cultural analysis. And all of those disciplines, they're international per se. And that's therefore our mission, to prepare our students for an international labor market. And to do so, we cooperate with institutions around the globe in many different ways. And what are the challenges we face for those transnational collaborations? Well, here I picked a few, and you will see some are the same as mentioned by Peter. And I tried to gather them in 3 categories. So the first category would be challenges linked to resources, like prioritization of resources. Then we have challenges linked to that are structural or legal, and then challenges of a more political nature. Resources, so it's an internal challenge, I guess, but one that is faced by all universities. So what international partnerships and projects do you prioritize, sometimes to the detriment of others? And what we do at Zürich University of the Arts is that we have a very broad palette of partnerships for mobility, for the mobility of our students, around 160, and most of them in Europe, by the way. And the aim is to give our students a large choice of quality destination if they want to be mobile. But we also have a yearly call for proposals for international projects of students and staff. We're funded by a private foundation for that. And here as well, we're super broad, very bottom up in terms of partners, topics, and geographical coverage. And where we have made a conscious choice of focus is with our shared campus network. It's a flagship international project with partners from Europe and Asia, so clear European and Asian focus here. And it offers a wide variety of international formats, summer schools, a semester abroad. You can see the link. I think the link was posted in the chat. And the reason why it's successful, it's interdisciplinary, so it's relevant for all our departments within Zürich University of the Arts. And it started very bottom up with common topics defined from teaching staff, and it has a super strong commitment from our university board. So it's good we have a focus. It also means it's difficult for us to be active in many other large projects. So here we still need to figure out how we could become active in the European universities. And we are, of course, very happy to be now able that Swiss partners can now join these initiatives as associate partners. So that's definitely a plus. Then the second type of challenge, I mean, I totally join Peter on the difficulty to achieve joint degrees. That's something that is that brings us a headache, and we have one, but it's complex. But there's another challenge we have that I'd like to mention is because we are a University of Applied Sciences and the Arts, by Swiss law, we cannot award PhDs. So we're bound to international cooperation to have PhD candidates here, which we have. You could argue it's a good thing, of course. We run several PhD programs in collaboration with Art University in Austria, Germany, and the UK. And we put a lot of work into securing the right framework conditions for those candidates. And it would definitely be an asset for us if we could ourselves award PhD. It would certainly make us more attractive. It's difficult to say whether this will change one day, but I think exchanging at European level on that is surely key, so that it changes one day. I mean, this would trigger changes on the long run, maybe. And finally, I mentioned challenges of a political nature. I'd like to highlight 2. The first one is linked to a large cooperation projects we have with a Chinese university. And there we face the challenge of making sure that our core principles, such as academic freedom, can be guaranteed. I think it's a very burning discussion in general at European level. And the European Commission published, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, guidelines on tackling research innovation foreign interference, and that is very useful to us in that respect. And the second political challenge we face is no big secret, of course, and it's the fact that we're not associated to neither Horizon Europe nor Erasmus+. Well, now I first need to repeat here for the audience, and that's something we keep repeating here within the institution, that collaboration with Swiss partners is possible, and it's important to still consider Swiss partners for projects. But of course, it would be an enormous advantage for now I'm talking for the whole research and higher education sector in Switzerland. But of course, we as an institution, we are also touched by the situation. But this would be a massive advantage if we were associated to those programs. And here the message is science and education collaboration should just be put before politics. And I think that's it for now.
That's making a nice transition, because I assume this message very much goes out as well to the European Commission. Thank you, Florence, for sharing as well your view. And I would now hand over indeed to Vanessa to explain us a little bit more. You consulted a lot of universities in your preparation for the strategy and the council proposal. And you could explain a little bit the challenges you saw, but also the solutions, especially that you think the EU can propose to that.
Yes, thanks a lot, Annalena. So indeed, as you say, we consulted a lot last year, and Peter, Florian, and you, Annalena, were part of these meetings, and especially one in July, where we gathered the member states, the important higher education stakeholders, and the coordinators of European universities. And I would like to start with a very important message, is that indeed these European Universities Alliances are test beds, and the real added value is that it has shown the limits that we are still, that the universities are still facing when putting in place deeper transnational cooperation. And the solutions that we want to propose, we want solutions to be applied to the entire higher education sector, not only to the European Universities Alliances. I think that's a very important message to pass, that solutions are for all. Now, what are the challenges that we heard during these meetings? And Peter and Florence have already mentioned quite a number of them. You mentioned before, Peter, these incompatible requirements to deliver joint programs and award joint degrees. And it's already complicated between two universities from two countries. But now, as one of the key objectives of this European strategy for universities is to really encourage bigger transnational cooperation between more higher education institutions, so not only two, but on average 7, at least this is the average that we currently have, 7 universities. So you can imagine the complexity to deliver a joint degree between seven higher education institutions. Because, and there are different reasons for that, the uneven implementation of the European approach for quality assurance that Peter, you mentioned, the lack of coherence in the way the Bologna instruments are implemented between different member states, including when it comes to the degree structures and ECTS, if they want to put in place a joint bachelor program, for example, there are different regulations between different member states with different minimum or maximum ECTS numbers. So that can be a barrier as well that we heard from the stakeholders and the European universities. What we have been asking the European Universities Alliances is really to dream the university of the future, to come up and to develop these interdisciplinary approaches to education that was mentioned in the previous panel, for example. We don't know all the jobs of tomorrow, but what we know is that we'll need more and more high-level skills. And we will need graduates and lifelong learners to be able to really cooperate together between many different expertise, between many different disciplines. So that's really important that the students during their stay at the university have that opportunity. But for that, we need to give the flexibility to the higher education institutions to be able to do that, to provide flexible learning pathways that are more adapted to different needs of a wide range of students and lifelong learners. You mentioned, Peter, the insufficient embedded mobility and different formats of mobility. Something that you did not mention yet, but that we heard a lot as well, is the insufficient interoperability between the digital infrastructures of the higher education institutions, because 7 of them use different IT infrastructures. It is really a challenge for them. And difficulties to access, share, and pool resources together, be it funding, be it data, being human resources, etc. and insufficient involvement of students and staff in the governance of such transnational alliances. So that is, in a nutshell, the challenges that we heard. Now, what can be the solutions, and how can the EU help within the limit of the treaty, but to bring more coherence to that? And this is our first attempt as a first step that we have proposed last week with a proposal for a council recommendation. So let me summarize a little bit what we have proposed there. First, we propose a recommendation for the member states to give more autonomy to their higher education institutions in the context of this transnational cooperation. More autonomy when it comes to admission and enrollment criteria of students and lifelong learners in these transnational education activities, more autonomy when it comes to defining languages of instructions, the share of online learning, more flexible learning pathways, as I said before. Recommendation to support embedded mobility in different forms in joint transnational educational programs, including through the deployment of the European Student Card Initiative. Support for high quality virtual collaborative learning and interoperable digital infrastructure. Remove the barriers to develop interdisciplinary activities and challenge-based approaches. One that is very important, and that Peter, you mentioned, is to really strengthen the trust through the external quality assurance. And here the objective would be to really foster the institutional quality assurance approach, to not accredit only a program, but the institution, based, of course, on a thorough methodology. Why? Because we are not fostering only one joint program between alliances of higher education institutions, but we are really promoting many joint programs. So that is why we would really want to encourage to move from a program accreditation to an institutional accreditation. Now, we know that it's not the case in all the countries. Some have a mixed regime, others are fully program accreditation oriented. For those ones, we really invite the member states to implement the European approach to quality assurance and to make sure that if one program is accredited in one country by one agency registered on ECA, which is the European Quality Assurance Register, then it should be agreed and approved and recognized by the other countries, so that these alliances do not need to get 7 or 8 or 9 different accreditations. And I think that's a very important step forward. And I mentioned as well to enable the improved participation of a wide range of learners, academics, and researchers in the governance of such alliances. Now, we have proposed as well 2 flagships to really help in deepening this transnational cooperation. So 2 more words, if you allow me, Annalena. One, because I'm sure there are many questions about it, and I think it's very important. One is proposing an approach, a step-by-step approach towards a legal statute for alliances of higher education institutions, not only the European Universities alliances, but any kind of alliance of higher education institution. And for that, we propose really to go step by step to analyze. We know that some alliances are testing some national statute, and what we hear from them is that it's not enough. It's a good start, but it's not enough. So we are doing a mapping of all of this, but what we know as well is that there are European instruments that exist and that maybe could be tested to see if this can work in this specific context of transnational cooperation in the field of higher education. They have not been developed for that. But let's see whether they could be used as such or whether they need some kind of improvement to avoid reinventing the wheel. If it doesn't work, then we will look, but at least we'll have learned from that experience to develop an instrument that is fit for purpose. But to do that, we need very solid and strong evidence. And that is why we propose to launch a small call this year to invite those alliances that feel ready to test such a European instruments, then we would provide some support for them to test it together with their ministries, because it's very important, the role of the ministries there. The second instrument that
Sorry, Vanessa, if I may interrupt you there, because we indeed had a question already on the legal statutes. Indeed, it's very good that you mentioned that. And you can maybe in the next short round briefly present the other flagship. I know there is still something else you would say. Yeah. So that maybe, because we're already a bit short of time, that Florian also has time to react from the member states side. That would be great, because we indeed have now heard a bit about the challenges, but also two of indeed the key proposals for some of the ways the EU could help. So the pathway towards the European degree and the statute. Indeed, Florian, from the member states perspective, from Austria, how does that look like? Is that something you think is realistic? Would it help, or do you have maybe other ideas on that? And then we can come back indeed to maybe the students' cards or other things that are still in there. Thank you.
Yes, hello and good afternoon from my side, and thank you very much for the invitation, and apologies for Elmar. First of all, I would like to start with also greetings to Florence, and I only want to support her in her last message. We from Austria, we always support Switzerland, especially when it comes to education and research, and definitely we will continue to support you, and hopefully you will be associated at one point. I want to start maybe with this topic of quality assurance, and I want also to support what Karl Dietrich wrote in the chat and what you said, Peter. I think this is a very important point, and from our point of view, quality assurance is one of the main issues that we have to deal in the coming semesters, and that's why we also welcome what the Commission has proposed in this regard, hopefully we can implement it and make one step further on this issue. Now, coming on the legal statute, well, I think this is one of these topics that needs certainly a longer discussion, and because I remember we during the Austrian presidency in 2018 we had already a discussion on this topic, and there are different opinions. They have already within the European Union legal possibilities to create common things. I think we have to see this, and we have to see this in under which conditions and under which framework we can test this. So we certainly need a test bed for that, and we need to see not only how it works in practicality, but also what are the next barriers that we encounter. I think for us, the member states, what is important in all this is to give the framework, the playground, so that universities can try and test new issues. I mean, I think we all agree that, of course, we need a closer cooperation, and not only in education, but also in research. And I think what has been said before, interdisciplinarity, I think this is really one key word. And we see it also in Austria that more and more cooperation, also at national level, is interdisciplinary, and brings to really very interesting results and good results. And we try to support universities from this. And to continue in this direction. What also maybe at one point to the mobility, what we have set up, or what since the start of the whole European University Initiative is we meet regularly the coordinators of the Austrian universities who work in this project, and so we get directly feedback from them. And I agree that mobility is the super and nice thing, but indeed there are challenges, especially with short mobilities. And now with the pandemic, we have seen also new models of mobility, blended mobility, virtual mobility, and that's not always easy not to implement it, as we from a ministry might think. and this has really led us to revise our legislation also and to think further. Maybe also one point to joint degrees, because it was also mentioned. Indeed, I've heard it already many times from universities complaining about the administrative burden when setting up a joint degree, and that's why it's an instrument that is not, people don't like it very much, and it's not that often used because it's a huge amount of work before you can implement it. And here, I think you can also see member states who might be more flexible and others who might be more static. When we heard about these problems, we have a European law, as a university law, which is flexible. Once a year, we do amendments. So we are in a continuous talk with universities. Less with universities of applied science. This is another issue because we have different laws for that sector. But also we start now a regular exchange of views in order to see how we can help them. But indeed, I agree that on these joint degrees, here we also need to do more homework for Austria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florian. You gave already a very comprehensive view as well on many of the topics, and I see now a question in the chat that has been voted up quite a lot, and I think that gives also Vanessa the possibility to actually come back to maybe a few things you wanted to say. There is a question from Karl Dietrich about the European quality assurance and recognition system that is mentioned in the European Strategy for Universities, and what is actually meant by this? Do we not already maybe have such a system? It's just called differently. Vanessa, could you answer that briefly, and then we have one last round afterwards? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Carl, for this question. As you know, in 2017, we have adopted a council recommendation, and it will answer another question in the chat, actually. We have adopted a council recommendation for the automatic recognition of higher education qualifications and ECTS credits earned abroad between the member states, so that any qualification earned giving access, for example, to a master or to a doctoral level in one country should give the same access in all the other countries. And ECTS credits earned abroad should be automatically recognized based on a learning agreement agreed before the mobility, should be automatically recognized in the other countries. Now, we're going to by the end of the year to have a report on the implementation of it. And then we'll see what are the next steps. But what we see is that actually automatic recognition is very much linked to quality assurance. And we have a council recommendation on quality assurance that dates back from 2006, which is quite outdated now. So our objective is to update this council recommendation, building on some of the first steps proposals that we are proposing in this one this year, and building on the outcomes as well on the report on the implementation of the council recommendation automatic recognition. Then we will come up with a proposal that takes into account the new needs from the higher education institutions for much more flexible learning pathways to learn, and have quality assurance systems that are more adapted to that and more adapted to this deeper transnational cooperation as well. So thanks a lot, Carl, for asking that question.
Thank you very much for answering that. We are already quite close to the end of our panel, but I would like to give all of you sort of one last thought, also the famous 10-20 seconds you have that you would like to give to the debate. And I would start with Peter. Again, asking you, you've now heard also the proposals from the Commission, the reaction from a member state. What is your view on that? What would you like to give into the debate as a last?
Yeah, well, I probably won't stick to the 20 seconds. Apologies for that. That would be too challenging, I think, because there have been so many things mentioned and said. And I already in my introduction applauded the work of the Commission, but this does not mean that everything has been fixed and solved. I think the trajectory has started now. and there are still many things to do. About the joint degree issue and the next steps on quality assurance, I think this is extremely important, but we should be very careful not to introduce more red tape in doing the business, because if we all are going to use our member state checks and balances, things will become very, very complicated. So the matter of trust between educational institutions and within the frameworks that are used to evaluate quality of programs is very important. So I think we should have agreements on that level, rather than on the work that needs to be done by academics working on the joint degrees. So additional requirements, additional degrees and so on, with different frameworks in parallel to what is already existing, I think this is not really the way forward, or at least it should be considered with a lot of care. And a little bit holds another caution on a very similar line I also have with the legal status. We could go very far there, but I don't think alliances like ours, Una Europa, has something like 50,000 students in now 9 countries. That really is a lot to work with. And what we do not want is a overarching structure which will be able to act as an independent university. We have the universities and they know how to do business, and we don't want to copy that. So we should not overcomplicate, but rather facilitate those things that we want to do together. And then maybe as a final comment, mobility has been mentioned. This has been at the core, I think, of all the alliances. Of course, not physical mobility, unfortunately, in this pandemic time, but we have been working hard on establishing also their new formats for the students, where students are key, and where we want to reinforce mobility, physical mobility, but also virtual and blended options. And there, I think a common challenge that we have is to make sure that this will also be sustainable enough in the future. We value these possibilities, but we should take all measures and also support financially or by compensating the sustainable cost. And in that sense, the initiatives, for instance, within Green Erasmus are also something that we should reinforce in the future. And then maybe one last commercial. Exactly today, we published our annual report. Yeah, very short. We published our annual report of Una Europa with more information on a couple of formats that we have realized and implemented. Thank you.
Very good. Well, I will maybe now first turn to Florian, and I will give Florence as the university the last word. So we do Florian, Vanessa, Florence. Florian, please, your thought for the end of the debate.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, I want fully to agree with Vanessa and what she just mentioned on quality assurance. What I observe, being somebody from a ministry and not involved in the daily work of universities, is when I see what's happening in Austria and how we react to barriers and so on, I sometimes really have the feeling that we see barriers more relaxed in the sense of that we can quite swiftly for a governance, for government react to that. And I see really that what I also see is we forge the instruments and we give you these instruments into your hands, but it's up to the universities then to use them. And these might sometimes two different worlds, and maybe not always connected. I also self-critically have to say that maybe they're not always well connected. But for example, regarding the joint degrees, we made an amendment to the university law and give them more flexibility. Maybe it's still too early for that because it was just a few months ago. But now it's up to university to implement it, to make it happen. And this is so to say the second part of the work, and that is something that we have to follow close. And it's not always working, and that I find it on the personal level also quite interesting that we still missing this link in order to between creating an instrument and implementing using this instrument. So yeah, that was just my final word. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, please. Yeah.
Yes, maybe I will say a few words about the European joint degree, because I see that there are some questions in the chat. Ragnhild, yes, of course, we're going to take into account the 80 years of experience of Erasmus Mundus. The executive agency coordinating this has made a very important study that shows the challenges that we mentioned before and the need to address them. So I want to reassure you, Peter, that the objective with the joint European degree is not to add more administration, but on the contrary, the objective is really to reduce the red tape. And as Florian said, it's fully voluntary. We fully respect the institute autonomy, so it's up to you whether you want to make use of it or not. It's really a help that we are trying to provide. Actually, a few hours ago, we discussed it with Business Europe on what can be the added value of such for the companies of such a degree. And actually, when we explain a little bit our objective with alliances such as European universities in terms of the challenge-based approach, interdisciplinary approach, the flexible learning path, and the fantastic opportunities for students to be able to develop all the skills that employers are looking for, they are all for it. And they want to be fully involved in its development. They immediately saw the potential for them as employers and students the same. Actually, yesterday they presented a manifesto during this forum on the future of universities under the French presidency of the Council of the European Union, and they came up with themselves with the importance of developing a joint European degree to develop this European identity for them, but also for them because they are proud to experiment what Europe is and what studying in not only two different universities, but within an alliance of universities can bring in terms of added value and skills. So we want to give recognition to that is useful for the employers, that is useful for the students, and make it simpler for universities to develop it. And this, of course, we want to do it with the universities, with the students, and with the ministries. And that's why we have given us until mid-2024 to come up with a proposal collectively. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for this. And indeed, then I would end with Florence as another voice of the universities on that.
Try to be very short. I think my main message is that we should always keep in mind that we do all of that for the students at the end of the day. And Vanessa mentioned several times the need for flexible learning pathways and interdisciplinary education. And that's something we are fully aware of. And we're actually reforming our curricula in a major minor system so that we can achieve those flexible pathways. And we try to actually integrate international formats in there so that our international networks and projects become sustainable also in terms of funding. And for that, one thing that would really help is to keep the funding schemes, the European funding schemes, as simple as possible. I mean, I totally agree with Florian when he said, well, at the end of the day, come on, universities, do something out of what you have there. And we are slow. Universities are slow. So it's our job to do it, but it's your job in a way to make those funding schemes as flexible as possible. And my last reaction will be on online formats. It's great for many things. We also saw the barriers of that. We saw that not everything is possible. And we see that students now, they are striving for real physical exchanges and mobility. So do keep that in mind as well when designing the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these last words. I think what you just said last, we do this all for the students mainly. That is indeed very true, especially on the education side. Shouldn't forget about the research side, of course, as well. But as we've seen, many of the proposals and many of the challenges for transnational collaboration are indeed linked to the education dimension still. And that's also where sort of the focus of the Commission proposals is. Thank you very much to all of you for your great contributions. We ran just a little bit over time, but I think that was very important because it also shows the many issues that there are still to discuss, and that we really should continue to do that and continue to do that also in the implementation phase, because as we know, for many of these instruments, the devil is really in the detail. and we have to develop them together with the sector, with the other stakeholders, with the students. And we, thank you very much that we started this discussion in a small circle here with a big audience, and we hope as EUA also to contribute to that, of course, in the future with these type of events and our various other input. And with that, I thank you and hand over to Amanda for the closing words. Thank you very much.